Pathcast. I'm this week's host, Eddy Webb, and with me are Dixie Cochran.
Hello.
And Matthew Dawkins.
Hello.
And today we still kind of getting back into the groove after conventions and whatnot, so we decided we're just going to have a nice casual chat, particularly about characters. We've had a couple of questions, particularly after our last podcast, of like what kinds of characters drew us into various games, what kind of characters we like to play. And so we thought it was a nice kind of build on from having made characters the last time the three of us were together. Now we get to talk about what kinds of characters we like and what kinds of characters are attractive to us, and also characters we don't like. And actually, I kind of want to start off a little bit is I've worked on the third edition of Chill. It seems like it's coming out of nowhere, but I swear it's coming somewhere. Growling Door Games have put it together, and they just posted a review of the game. And it was one of those kind of, the game is great, it's a really great modern day horror game, but the characters they offer aren't as good as the original edition characters because they kind of have a political agenda. And it's like, because I wrote those characters, and it was very frustrating. Because the last edition of Chill, which was like in the 90s, was actually surprisingly very coolly diverse. You know, there are people of color in there are people with disabilities in there, people of different presentations. For 20 years ago, it was fantastic. And so I was like, cool, let's just rework those characters into this game. And of course, you know, because it's something I'm very passionate about, you know, we talked about having some disabled characters in that spread. And I realized when I saw that thread this morning and we were walking into this podcast, that's something that is really appealing to me, is when a game shows a lot of options, not only for the kind of you see yourself in the game moment of inclusivity, but also just shows that the game itself has a lot of breadth. When you see characters that are very similar, that's very much a turnoff for me in games. How about you? Do you guys have games that you've looked at, you go, wow, I really love the characters in that?
Well, Vampire the Masquerade, obviously.
Right.
I mean, it stood out very early on to me in my role-playing experience, just from the cast list, the clan stereotypes, I guess, in Revised, for instance. Those incredibly striking, almost cartoonish in places when you think of the size of Theobald's chest images.
Right.
But when I compared it to any of the other games I was playing at the time, there wasn't anywhere near so much representation of black characters, of women, and then when you started reading into the text, you started seeing gay characters. You started seeing that there was, and but at this point I hadn't realised there was some cultural baggage here as well. That there was an Indian clan, there was a Middle Eastern clan, and things like that. At face value, all of that kind of material really appealed, because I thought, wow, why is no other contemporary game doing this? I can play a character from anywhere, from any background, and so I often did. Mm-hmm. I very rarely played any, I guess, straight white males is a common term, because there was so much of a plethora of characters I could be instead.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to talk about my early entry into it, because my early entry into it was pretty much entirely D&D and World of Darkness games. But, across all the World of Darkness games, there were a lot of really cool things that stood out in them to me as well, much of which Matthew just kind of talked about. Also, but a little later, things like Shadowrun, I think you can do a lot with that.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah.
And pretty much any kind of cyberpunk game, things like Eclipse Phase, where you can be in almost any form that you want on some level. That's very, very cool to me. So that's something that I do notice. I'm kind of the opposite of Matthew. I always tended to play characters that looked at least somewhat like me, or were a little bit more like me, because I was so afraid of screwing it up or being a stereotype by accident. I didn't want to come off as even slightly racist, so I just played a lot of white characters. Or a lot of characters from races that were fantastic and didn't exist, like a tiefling or something, you know?
I think that's fair, because when I think of the characters I played way back when, I don't think I cringe, but I can certainly identify the places from which I've grown.
Right.
You know, ways I wouldn't have portrayed a character, for instance, various backstory elements I probably wouldn't include in a character I write today, because it's far too stereotypical, far too offensive. And at the time I thought, wow, this is unique. And of course, you know, I've expanded my palette since then, become a little more informed and grown up, quite frankly.
Right.
And that's allowed me to gain the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah, precisely. I am sure that even with some of the characters I played back in like high school, I'm still sure I did cringy things that I luckily don't really remember. But then if I did, I'd probably go back and be like, oh no, that wasn't great.
Well, I mean, I know a cringy character I played that I do remember. I talked about this character before, the Bruja Anarch that became very extremist right around 2001.
Yeah.
But the piece I didn't mention during that story was that he's half Japanese.
Okay.
Because it was the 90s and there's no good reason why my character's half Japanese, but that was kind of the zeitgeist. Like, that would be cool and exotic. And now I look at that and go like, oh my god, that was a terrible. That should never have been okayed. It should never have been played through.
I mean, I think it's okay to be half Japanese as long as you're handling it okay. But the fact that you just used the word exotic, which is a pretty problematic word these days,
exactly.
That's where it's like, oh no. No.
Yeah. No. I mean, one thing I can look to with pride is that, you know, after I made the character, regardless of the reasons why I made him that way, I did do a ton of research and talking to people. And I worked in elements of specifically Japanese American culture. I really quickly shifted him away from anything to do with the country. Okay, no, there's a very distinct culture of people who come from Japanese heritage who live in America. They have their own distinct subculture, and playing into that rather than this frankly fetishized view of Japan. So I mean, but still, again, it's one of those things that I was a much younger role player back then. I would definitely not do any of that stuff now. And I use it as an object lesson. They go, hey, you know, we all do make mistakes. As long as you can learn from them and move past them, you know, then you're growing as a player.
Yeah, I feel like I'd be a lot more comfortable today, especially with games like Harlem Unbound, things of that nature. You know, playing characters of color. It's kind of funny because I actually do it a lot in my video games. Like if I'm making a Skyrim character or whatever,
right?
I will often make them a character of color or a Mass Effect character, just because I think that's representation that's interesting. But but then I'm not the one speaking for them. And that's where I get nervous. That's when I'm the one speaking for them, and I don't want to, you know, I don't want to do it wrong, but I also don't want to like not do it because then that seems like I'm scared. It's a whole tightrope that would probably be its own episode, to be perfectly honest.
Well, you know, I think it's something we can quite easily incorporate into this one, as we've got a rather loose framework.
Yeah, well, and we already have on some level.
Yeah. One thing I got as feedback on Chicago by Night, and this is feedback to which I am forced to say fuck you, was that we included too many Native American characters in Chicago by Night for V5.
What?
Because it tilted the cultural balance in Chicago to an unrealistic degree. I think was the words used. And someone was talking about on an RPG Net as well. It wasn't being criticised on RPG Net. I don't think that would stand. But someone certainly cited that discussion. And yeah, when I heard that, I thought, really? You know, you're going to complain that there's too many Native American characters in Chicago? And it made me realise how many games I have played in which the entire cast is made up of white guys, especially the characters in Power.
Right.
even in Vampire, which, from its genesis, really, excluding a couple of clans that were at least initially portrayed as being fiercely misogynistic, I think the Tremere and the Assamites, now the Banu Hakim, used to be, not so much anymore. Most princes would be white men. And you know, often with very little reason, because any other character is just as capable of earning experience if you look at it at a mechanical level. But also, it's still a fantastical game. It's still a fantasy game. You can do whatever you like, so why restrict yourself?
And I mean, some of our design stuff, like these kinds of choices, are intentional. When I worked at White Wolf, the term we used are called the iconics, or the iconic characters, which, of course, for wrestling fans is now slightly amusing, but because the iconics are an actual tag team. But I did the same thing like for Pugmire. Is like, you know, when you have those pre-generated characters, or, you know, Scion or whatever. In Vampire the Masquerade, there's a ton of iconic characters that are constantly referenced and used, but people look to those as representative examples of what you can do in a game.
Right.
And so you really need to nail those. So whenever I work on a game that has new iconic characters, I spend a lot of time thinking about those, specifically to make sure not only for inclusivity purposes, but also just breadth of playstyle.
Yeah.
You know, it's like one of the reasons why Jack Rat Terrier is in Pugmire is because I wanted to show that for a game that's so heavily about be a good dog, that being a dog that goes against the law is not necessarily against the core tenets of the game.
Yeah.
So I had to get a kind of roguish character in there, not just because it's a character class, but also show like I'm not a bad dog. You know, I need to show that dynamic in there. And again, it had to be right there, boom, front page. Oh, there's a guy in cool black armor with a dagger. That looks interesting. I could play those kinds of characters too. That's the thing you need to be getting across. So when I see games do that well, I very much appreciate it. Like you said, Shadowrun, Vampire, those are all great examples of showing here's so many different kinds of characters you can play, and usually they do it very, very quickly.
Yeah, I think that you're talking about what we in Exalted call our signature characters, and we had the same kind of discussions where we want there to be representation across the board. We, you know, when we're developing like who the SIGs are going to be for a new book, whether it's Dragon Blooded or the upcoming Lunars, there's usually a pretty long discussion about it. Like, what do I want the person to look like? What do I want them to be like? Because we want people to see themselves in Exalted, for all that it's a, you know, hugely fantasy setting. We want you to open the book and flip through the signature characters and go, oh, that's my body type. Oh, that person does a thing that I do. Oh, that person has my skin color, you know, whatever. And actually, Megan Fitzgerald brought up something really recently that we're going to try to, I think, work in soon. And that's having a better age spread. Because we don't really have any older signature characters. We certainly don't have any that are women. And after seeing characters like, you know, General Leia and Admiral Holdo and stuff in Star Wars, things like that, I'm like, well, we could, I mean, let's do that. Let's definitely do that. There are some badass older women out there, so we're going to try to do that, I think, soon. But yeah, so that's all stuff we try to think about. And especially as those of us who've been playing for a long time, and then some, you know, there are many women who came well before me into the role-playing game industry. As we get older, like, I'm going to want to see myself in games still.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is why I still love in V5 the one portrait of the older woman vampire, because I'm like, hey, that's not a thing that you almost ever see. That's really cool.
Yeah, but I'll take the credit. That's Fiorenza Savona, a Ventru prodigy. She's still supposed to be a relatively new embrace, but she has ascended to power because of her political savvy, her cutthroat ability, and just generally being a powerful woman in a sphere that doesn't necessarily expect that.
Right.
And in fact, on those V5 iconics, on the same note, one of the characters I wrote, one of the iconics I wrote, was a character by the name of Rudy, who is the Gangrel iconic, and he's also drawn a fair amount of criticism. Because people have said, why would a gangrel be an SJW pejorative? And this sort of character is completely unrealistic, because Rudy is, he's a part Danish, part Arabic, male, Muslim, homosexual. and even as a vampire, he still makes his retainers of groups such as Antifa and other social justice groups.
Right.
Now, a lot of people have said you've just basically poured every single layer of leftism on top of this character, and the fact is he's based on a real person I know.
Right, because I know people like that.
Who lives in Denmark, who is a Muslim. He's a solicitor by day, and he is a complete raver by night. And in fact, I know he listens to this podcast. I'm not going to name him because I know that he is gay. Quite happily so, but he won't tell his parents,
right.
Because they are quite, I guess, dogmatic.
Right.
And but yeah, he has a completely civil life during the day and a completely, in his words, debauched life by night. And he loves his life, but he is certainly the character I then, with a few tweaks, made into the Gangrel iconic, because I thought, what is something we could do that's a really interesting character for Clan Gangrel in this edition? And I thought, well, I know a really interesting guy who is pretty much already a Gangrel.
Mm-hmm.
And he was delighted to, with a few alterations, be included in the game. But I think having that kind of representation in a game isn't serving a cause, isn't pushing an agenda necessarily. It's making the world you're painting far more interesting, far more realistic, and also from a pure marketing perspective is more likely to appeal to a greater, more diverse customer base. If everyone in the game is white and straight and male, then you're pretty much telling your audience something. And I think there's plenty of arguments for doing the opposite.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's something that I've always been really big into. I mean, even the early D&D I was playing, I was, like, when I was 7, like, the stuff I was playing when I was a kid, I was excited, because there were, women with swords, and women casting spells, and women doing stuff. Granted, they were all pretty much, gorgeous white women. But there were still women, and that was something that was new. And then as I got older, I started caring more about all the other aspects of diversity, and kind of going like, oh, my friends can see themselves in this game. In my high school, where I started playing Vampire the Masquerade, there was a huge amount of crossover between our Gay Straight Alliance and our Sci-Fi Fantasy Club, where we played games. And so I was playing with a lot of LGBT plus youth when I was, playing Vampire the Masquerade originally, and a lot of them, they're people that I've run across from my sci-fi fantasy days, or what we used to call Skiffy, and I keep trying not to call it Skiffy. That was like our joke shorthand for it. But there are a lot of kids from my Skiffy days that I've run across as an adult and found out that they've transitioned, or they are genderqueer, or something is different that they wouldn't talk about in high school. And I love that, and I hope that they could see themselves in some of these games we were playing, because back in the 90s, they certainly weren't seeing themselves in many other places.
Right.
Now it's a lot more common, with how many games are out there, and how many, smaller games are out there, and indie games. It's possible to see just about any kind of person in a role-playing game, which I think is great. But I want to see all those kinds of people in all the games on some level. Yeah,
absolutely. I completely agree. So, I mean, we've talked a lot about kind of seeing ourselves and our friends in these games. So, I mean, in terms of the character, moving away from demographic concerns, let's say.
Right.
What other kinds of things that draw you into characters? And what kinds of things you find yourself going back to the well on? I know for me, whenever I'm learning a new game, I generally play whatever equates to the default fighter character. And there's a very good mechanical reason for that, is because combat rules traditionally are the most complicated part of a tabletop role-playing game. And so by choosing a character that opts into combat, it allows me to learn the hardest part of the game very quickly, and then everything else kind of falls out from that. But I've also learned over time that it allows me a very clear path in, because in social groups, and I know this is going to shock some people, I have trouble finding a way into a social group sometimes because of my hearing loss and because of my introvertedness.
Right.
And by being the combat character in adventure games, I always have an immediate and useful purpose at all times. There's always going to be a need for a guy who can punch somebody else in the face. So it doesn't require me to know a lot about what's going on, which is if I don't hear what's going on, then I'm not missing a ton. I can just play a dumb fighter and go, I don't know what's going on, just tell me who to punch. And then if I don't hear all the nuances of the plan, I'm not missing much. And then there's always a need to call me into fights and call me into scenes. So I found that that's a well I tend to go to a lot for new games or new groups.
Yeah.
Are there other things like you guys have?
I'd say I'm the opposite.
Really?
I like playing. Well, okay. I am that, like, if I'm going to a new group and other people have already kind of figured out what they're playing, I'm always that person that will say, like, well, what's everybody else playing? Because I don't really care. Like, I will play anything. Often I find that, especially with groups of newer players, there's already, like, a fighter and a wizard and whatever. And so I come in as a ranger a lot, or a ranger-type character, because they have a lot of utility. I'm like, well, I can find his food, and I can track things, and I can do this, and I can do that, and I have ranged, and I have up-close fight, like, I can do all these things.
So Swiss Army knife characters.
Exactly. So I play those a lot. However, if I am coming at something where they're like, play whatever, we don't care, I almost always play the, like, kind of charismatic, what Shadowrun would call a face character.
Okay.
Because I, as y'all may know, am not introverted.
What?
And enjoy talking. And I like, I don't know, I like doing a little bit of an interesting thing with characters. The last D&D campaign I played in was actually a port of Eberron onto 5e that my GM had made. And so I played a psionic, but also kind of the face character because she was a Kalishtar, which I found homebrew rules for. And they're supposed to be, like, just ridiculously pretty. And I was like, cool, well, I'll do all the talking. Because my group was fairly new. And at least 2 people in my group were incredibly quiet people. So one of them played, like, a rogue type, and the other one played a fighter. And so I was like, yeah, so I'll just play the face character. I'll do a lot of the talking. I'll do a lot of the negotiating, whatever. It does sometimes mean that in a group of newer players, I end up kind of being the de facto leader, which I've been trying to get better about passing that off if it gets passed to me.
Right.
And being like, no, you're new. You make decisions. But yeah, I've played Rangers in almost every new game that I've played in D&D for a long time because they're super easy, super utilitarian. If I find out that our group doesn't have a fighter, though, doesn't have someone who can essentially tank, I'll be like, cool, that's me now. Or if I find out that we don't have any healing, cool, that's me, that's fine. I'll play that. Because I have played everything at this point, but what I like to play are the charismatic negotiator, kind of mysterious, whatever characters. That's just what I go for.
I think what this tells me, and something I've never really quite realised before, is how damn well D&D, especially come 2nd edition, really classified the brackets of character type.
Yes.
Because in pretty much any game now, we will look at things as the fighter type, rogue type, the magic user, or what have you.
Oh, totally.
And we know that that's why the Tremere were added to Vampire the Masquerade. I think it's was it Chris McDonough said, where's the wizard, when he looked at the 6 clans, and that's why the Tremere got ported over from Ars Magica. And I obviously tried to do the same thing with the Setites come V5 and said, where's the cleric? And that's how they ended up in the Anarchs. But I'm, I guess, more like Dixie. The kinds of characters I play tend to be spellcasters. I like playing the either puzzle-solving, thoughtful types, or megalomaniac types, surprise, surprise, or the charismatic types. I have never actually played a pure fighter in any game. Really? So in no game of D&D or Pathfinder have I ever played a fighter, because it just doesn't interest me. There is no appeal to me.
I'm not sure I have.
For some reason, it paralyzes my character, I guess, my character development. When I try and reach the stage where I think this guy kills things for a living, I'm not sure why this is. It obviously says something about me, but I can very rarely make that arc without making a horrible shit of a character. And so I played a paladin before, or tried, and he was an awful paladin.
Huh.
He was very much a Snake Plissken style paladin, who basically became a Ronin and wasn't by any means noble, even if he did have his own strand of honour. I guess it'd probably work better in D&D 5, because the paladins in that... in fact, I have played a paladin in D&D 5, and so that was alright. But yeah, I generally go for wizards. I think the longest running character I ever played was a wizard in Dungeons and Dragons. And that has stuck with me to the point that even in Call of Cthulhu, I'm probably the first person to start picking up the forbidden text.
Right.
And say, don't worry, my sanity's high enough, my power's high enough, I can read this without any negative
Yeah, I do
effect.
that too. Last time that I played Call of Cthulhu, I was playing like Jessica Fletcher from Murder, She Wrote character. Just like a 50-something-year-old novelist who just kept being like, it's fine, honey, I've got this. She was pretty great. I don't know. So I like playing those. It's really funny too, because I always like D&D really does like permeate a lot of what we think about with characters, no matter how far away from that system we're playing. Because I also always think of like alignment, even if that is, you know, backgrounds or something in other games, or like how your character sees the world. Because we did kind of pitch this episode as a tell us about your characters, I'm going to tell you about my characters.
Please do.
Because we never do that to each other, because we're always so like, oh, we hear it at the booth all the time, but let's go. My favorite recent character I played in D&D, it was in a fairly short campaign, but I will totally bring her back for any game ever. And she was a halfling named Jane Giantsbane, and she was chaotic good. And I based the entire character off the Jane song from Firefly, only it had actually happened. So she was raised by dwarves, and then there was an evil person that was making the dwarves work too hard and taking all their money, and so she went and she stole all the money and she gave it back to them, then she had to flee. So she had the folk hero background. But I would occasionally sing like my own version of the Jane song. But because she was chaotic good, like she was so sweet and she was so tiny and she talked really fast and she talked like this and she was really good at everything. But if she saw a goblin, she just was going to kill them because they were evil, and that's what you do to goblins. You kill them because they're evil. And she was so much fun to play. Partially because too, she was a ranger, because I was like, why not? Because my group was all new people. So I was like, I'll be a ranger, I'll be helpful, whatever. But she also slowly acquired animals by, I kept rolling like ridiculously well on handle animal checks. So I ended up with a pack of 3 wolves that were my friends that wouldn't come into the city with us because the city guards were afraid of them. So we sent them off into the woods and then named them Chekhov's wolves because they were obviously going to come back at some point and save me. And
Wolf
by
over
the end of it, I had that. I had a tiny flying snake. I had my riding dog. And at some point I ended up taming a sentient mimic that became my friend. And that I rode around on. Yeah, it was ridiculous. It was so ridiculous. But yeah, so that was my most recent, like, most fun character to play. Just because she was very convinced of what was right, even if it maybe seemed a little weird of a plan.
Right. How about you, Matthew?
It's for me, I guess a recent character I played that I really latched onto was an elf from Aslan in Shadowrun.
Okay.
And he was a combat decker.
Okay.
I love deckers.
So there we go. We've just broken the D&D mold. And the thing I enjoyed about playing that character the most was he was a complete mercenary. Our long campaign did end up with a 3-way standoff. All of our characters were stood across from each other in a hotel room. We finally had a ridiculous amount of new yen, and we were all aiming guns at each other, and the employer, the person who had hired us, was whispering in one of the characters' ears, basically saying, you need to take this one out quickly. And my character was the only one that got away with it in the end. I got away with all the money. But this was after some particularly awful acts, including, and warnings to anyone who doesn't like any descriptions of violence. At one point, we had to get into a secure facility in the game, and it required bypassing a retina scan. And
did you carve out somebody's eyeball?
I did, and you know what? And I feel and at the time, I felt justified for doing it.
At the time, it made perfect sense.
I am pretty sure I've done that in Shadowrun.
Yeah, I took them to... Beforehand, I took them to a lovely restaurant that served real vegetables. Ooh. So this was a proper, a real deluxe location in Las Vegas, which is where our game was set. And so it wasn't like I didn't treat them well beforehand. But then I carved out their eyes and killed them because I didn't want them running back to their employer. And when one of the other characters entered my character's hotel room to find out what the noise was about, they found this body hanging over the bathtub, draining, and me just saying, we're going to have to take a trip out to the desert. But it transpired afterwards. The GM was pretty much agog from this rather foul behaviour and said, you could have just... asked, you could have charmed that person and asked them to work for you. You could have bribed them, could have stolen their ID and got in via another way, and your automatic solution was, in a sense, for your character, the quickest and most brutal. You thought, how am I going to get in? Retina scan. How am I going to get past a retina scan? Eyeballs. And yeah, despite being utterly horrible, I got away with the loot at the end, and yeah, it was a delight.
That's pretty amazing.
Good, clean fun.
Yeah. That's. I mean, it's really what Shadowrun's all about, right? It's a very wholesome game.
Right. So for me, one of my favorite characters in the past few years has been Ezio. We played a Renaissance Italy 4E D&D game, and I played a half-elf rogue. And part of it was Ethan Skemp. He did his own custom world, but one of his frustrations with 4E is that if you play a half-elf, people get a charisma bonus for being around you, but there's no flavor as to why that is. He's just like, hey, like your half-elf, I think I want to hang out with you. It's like, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, that's really weird, actually.
Right, it is. It's like, that makes no sense.
Hey, you've got a hot friend. Can I be your friend?
Basically, yeah, right? And it's like, well, I'll play the hot friend. That's fine. But in Ethan's game, the half-elves actually are the House Diplomats. So basically, they're not good enough to be with the actual elvish families, but humans respect at least half-elves better than, whatnot. So it's like they're kind of the go-betweens between the elvish families and humanity. And so everyone kind of respects them, and they also tend to intermarry a lot. They're a house that really gets people to marry to other families for political goals.
Right.
So I was like the firstborn son of my family, and it's like, cool, you're going to marry some elvish woman and make an alliance. And I was like, yeah, nah, bro. And I bailed, right? So just gone. So very kind of playboy, young half-elf, lots of kind of Bruce Wayne type shenanigans, except for there's no duality. That was just pretty much him. And so the inciting incident was I jumped out of a woman's window before her brother walked in on us. And so their family was hunting us down. So that was like my enemy for like a year of game time, was like this family kept hunting us down. And then finally we go to, we confront them, we're dealing with them, and her brother has me at sword point. It's like, how are you going to resolve this? And I had like 5 million things in my head, but none of them are what came out. What came out was, I'll marry her. And like the whole table just stopped. I'm like, what? And even I was like, what? What did I just say? And he's like, roll bluff. And I'm like, I don't think my character's bluffing. And Ethan was like, oh, okay, roll convince then. And sure enough, massive success. And so my character actually had a wife. And she was a badass that kept my character in line, which is what he desperately needed. And so it was just loads of fun, because the first half it was like, the kind of power fantasy of, haha, I'm a free spirit and I can have sex with all these women. And then afterwards it became like, what if you're a rogue, but you actually have a wife and a family and responsibilities? And that became really, really cool to me. And I spent a lot of time exploring that of like, I have a devotion to my house, but also I'm now in too deep in these other nefarious schemes I need to resolve.
Yeah, I don't think it's interesting in any like role-playing game when your family comes up.
Right,
like,
and it just never does.
If your character has that. Yeah. Because, like, you know, if your character has a sibling or a parent or a significant other or whatever they're close to, like, how do you reconcile your adventuring with the fact that you still have this person? You know, often you have, like, a tragic backstory where, like, your whole family was killed or your wife was killed or whatever. And it's what if they're just waiting for you while you're off trying to earn money in the world, you know?
It's one of those things I think Werewolf the Apocalypse and Werewolf the Forsaken are fantastic at. You know, the idea of the importance of family. It allows you to build, well, as the sourcebook for Forsaken, the pack, is very good at describing that entire family unit and how you can incorporate it into your chronicles. And yeah, I think it can be absolutely vital. I ran a Werewolf the Apocalypse game set on New Orleans, and it was very much about the protagonists, their family, their extended family, and it wasn't simply that family members were being taken hostage so that gives you a motive to do things. It was how they balance their mundane life with the fact that they're a feral beast. Which I think is one of those elements of Werewolf that really needs to be brought to the fore to get the themes across. It's the duality of being a werewolf, not just being eco-warrior werewolf 24/7.
Right.
But I guess that's down to my tastes. If people want to run it the other way, they can feel free to do so and have a great deal of fun.
Oh, to be fair, I mean, I certainly actually one of the short stories I wrote for the Werewolf 20 anthology was basically werewolf leverage. You know, I mean, there's definitely a lot of fun that can be had there. But I agree with you. I think Werewolf the Apocalypse, in particular, but both werewolf games, really hit their stride when there are people you have to go back home to, because then the cost of the war really hits home on a very real level. And actually, that kind of ties into another kind of next thing I've been thinking about is, definitely we've talked a lot about fun and what's not actually fun, and catharsis. We've talked about that a lot too. So have there been characters in your life, whether it's something you've played, something other people have played, or a character you've seen in a game, that has helped you or someone else work through something?
I mean, I don't think I can expand on it much more beyond what I talked about several episodes ago about just like kind of playing a character that's an idealized version of yourself kind of helps you be the idealized version of yourself.
That's fair, yeah.
But no, not really, because like unlike some of the other folks we've talked to who do approach some really heavy games as entertainment but not fun, I tend to play for fun. Like, I am usually playing to have a good time. I'm not opposed to playing a more horrific type game, but I've never been emotionally impacted in any significant way by a game I was playing.
Right.
Even with the character I played for many, many years in Vampire the Masquerade, who I loved, and I mean, if she had been killed, I probably would have been sad, because I loved her so much. But as far as I know, she's still an NPC in some of my friends' games.
Nice.
Because she's been around for so long. Because I played her for, 5 years or so. And she owned the local, neutral area where all different kinds of supernatural creatures could hang out. And so they used that location a lot. And I think she is probably still the bartender.
Well, that's fun.
So, yeah, she's my favorite. I mean, that's a character that I could always talk about because she was my like first like big epic character that I played for a long time. Her name was Desdemona. She was Malkavian, but didn't have any visible derangements. It was all OCD, megalomania type stuff. So she just, cleaned a lot. And various other things that she usually could get down to her basement apartment before they kicked in. But yeah, no, like that was my character for a long time. I can still picture her. I still know what she looks like. But yeah, I haven't been like... If I have used it to work through stuff, used any games to work through stuff, it was on a very subconscious level. where I didn't realize I was doing it, I would have to say.
That's fair.
I think I've got a couple of examples. One is where I was GMing and witnessing it in another player, and this is one of those learning points where I definitely grew up as a GM, and I think the rest of the table did as well. There were 6 players for this game, maybe even 7 players, but somehow it ran all right. It was a Pathfinder campaign that was strongly based, at least at the start, on the Baldur's Gate 2 plot.
Oh, okay.
And I borrowed some of the NPCs from Baldur's Gate 2 because I loved those characters. Yeah. And one of the protagonists, one of the PCs, was in the Copper Coronet Inn in Athkatla. And what we'd done before the campaign started is I got all of the players to write down 3 allies and an enemy. And they could be from any walk of life, and they could be family, they could be from their background, they could be present-day enemies, what have you. One of the characters had chosen a halfling assassin as a constant threat. He was constantly appearing. He was like the guy in Lost Highway that is just constantly in the corner of the room staring. And for whatever reason, the two had never settled their hash. Now, this halfling, who I ended up naming Monteron and pretty much basing off the Zentarim character of that name from Baldur's Gate, had escalated his rivalry with this elven sorcerer to the point that rather than destroying him, he was determined to destroy everything around him. And that moved on to the party itself. Now, this was the moment where we all had a growing up point. One of the characters in the group, another halfling bard, was going to their bedroom at the Copper Coronet, failed their fortitude save when they hit their head to the pillow. Right. Didn't know why they had to roll it. And it was then that I expressed that their character was paralysed, that their pillow had been dosed with a paralysing agent, and I can't remember which poison it was. Monteron then scooted out from underneath the bed, and he didn't do anything. He didn't do anything beyond saying to the paralysed player character, I could carve you up right now. I could kill you right now. I could put my name in you, and your friend, the elven sorcerer, would see it. And you wouldn't. None of you would be able to do anything about it. Then Monteron climbed out of the window and fled into the night. And even talking back about it now, it makes me feel ill, because I know I was a lot younger then when I ran this game, and a lot more stupid, and the whole load of us were, and none of us really connected the dots to what I was doing as a GM in this scene. But a couple of weeks later, we all discussed it. It just came up, that scene. In one measure, it was, I guess, applause, because, wow, I've never seen such a disturbing scene with so little done. But on the other, it was, I think if we have things like that again in a game, we need warnings in advance that sort of thing might happen. And it was just the alternative use of a poison in D&D, in Pathfinder. But the way it affected the player's character afterwards, and I have to take my hat off to the player, they played upon it. They used it for their strength. They incorporated it into their character background. They didn't act as stereotypical, I guess, I spit on your grave type character would, thankfully. And it was a really strong character arc, but at the same time, all of us, the player included, really grew up from that moment because it was such a shocking
Yeah, I'm not
scene.
gonna lie, like, I'm over here being a little bit quiet because I just got such, like, creepy, like, Jessica Jones Kilgrave vibes from that, and I'm not okay with that. Like, I'm so not okay with that.
Yeah. No, it's not something I would ever run again. and I'm not describing it with any pride. I can assure you of that.
I mean, that's good on some level.
Was,
like, I like that kind of villain, obviously, because I watched Jessica Jones and I've watched Black Mirror and all that stuff. I just wouldn't like it happening to me. So yeah.
No, and that's the thing. That is exactly the kind of thing that I should have checked with the player at the very least, if not the entire group. Are you going to be cool with something like this happening? Because I knew that there was going to be the risk of this happening because I planned it. And I knew one of them was going to have to roll a fortitude save, which everyone went up to their bedroom first. And yeah, it's an odd thing to look back on and realise, oh wow, okay, I should have been a little more responsible there. But the player certainly took it to evolve their character and made it the best character they ever played, in their opinion, mine as well. So, wow, that was a heavy one. And I guess, on the flip side of that, sorry to be waxing on a little, but just to talk about one of my characters briefly. So I was playing a vampire, the Masquerade. I was playing a character by the name of Helen Milner, or Milliner, if you prefer, one of the Giovanni minor families, but she was embraced by a Toreador. In fact, it was set in Chicago, and she was embraced by Brett Stryker, who was in Chicago by Night, 5th edition. And this was a game that we started off as mortals, and it was a sort of a mass embrace because the Sabbat were attacking the city. And then those that survived were kind of drawn into the camera and had to deal with it. I can't explain why exactly my character, who I hadn't been attached to for longer than a session, left me dry-mouthed, my heart beating, I was out of breath, my hands were shaking, when one of the other players said to me in the game, well, your life is better now. You must have wanted that. You must have enjoyed the embrace, because I did. And for some reason, I just came over cold. Wow. I felt all of those things, and I didn't know what I was experiencing. And I started shouting. I was in character, but I was irate. I was incensed that they could dare assume that I would have wanted to become a vampire. My character was a amphetamine-hooked student who was just trying to get a buzz to get through the next set of exams. A lot of pressure on her. Came from a wealthy family, but tried not to lean on them too much. Not a terribly innovative background or anything like that. But for whatever reason, as soon as that assertion was made, that you're one of us now, that's good. You wanted that, didn't you? I just exploded. And the rest of the table was stunned, and afterwards I was told that you were clearly having some kind of adrenaline rush there. And I can feel it now, actually, in describing it. I can feel myself actually getting amped up, because the experience of playing that character, and I've played through plenty of embraces, but I think it was maybe the exact use of words.
You must have wanted it.
Inflection that the player used.
Can I jump in for a second, since y'all are the ones talking? I find it very satisfying on some level, even though I like you and don't want you to go through anything bad. I find it very, very satisfying sometimes to hear, especially straight men, have to struggle with having their agency taken away.
Yeah.
Because that's just not something that happens very often. And I like that you at least have had some experience that made you feel that. Because it makes, I think, people able to deal with talking to other marginalized folks who have their agency taken away constantly. Because that's definitely a phrase that is often used in a much worse context. And
absolutely. I can, if I was to perform a little self-analysis, tie it back to my own past if I wanted to. But I don't feel like that was what I was feeling at the time. It was just an immediate feeling.
Just shortcut right to your instincts, as it were.
Yep.
Exactly. And for the rest of the session, I remember my hands shaking in front of me, and it's bizarre. It's one of those things that I imagine anyone listening to this will probably think, well, that's a bit weird. The idea of me sitting at a table for a couple more hours, just coming down from that adrenaline rush and feeling exhausted. I had a headache by the end of it. But it's, again, one of those characters that completely stuck with me, not because of anything they particularly did after becoming a vampire, but because of the way I got into that character for that brief moment, and it just exploded across the table.
Actually, that ties into the character that I was going to talk about. And it's interesting, it wasn't intended this way, but it also ties into the loss of agency thing. I played a Bonar character in Werewolf the Apocalypse, who was a recovering addict. I started gameplay. He had been starting with AA meetings because he did heroin. And I was trying to work through, because I'm pretty sure I've talked about it before. I've had a lot of alcoholism in my family, and so I was trying to work through, okay, I've never had these instincts. What is it like to kind of deal with that and deal with the society where you can't just engage in certain things? And for like a year, it was pretty fine. Most of the characters, respected, tried not to drink around my character. We stopped having meetings in bars. And it was I was like, it's okay. I mean, this is good. I felt like I was coasting with the character. I was like, well, maybe I like getting one out of this. And then a new player came to the game, had no clue about my character's backstory. But there's a fetish in the game that gives you a benefit before you go into battle if you take this magic mushroom, which my character had never seen before. And so brand new character comes up, it's like, hey, I want to give you a gift because you're a respected Bonar. It's okay, cool, thanks. It's like, eat this, make you more powerful. And before she could finish explaining, my character just ate it. Because my thought was that's what my character would do. It's like, it gives me important things, and I'm just so used to that process of I take a thing and put it in. Because it wasn't contextualized as drugs, my character kind of just right in there. And as soon as I found out in character what it was, I went, just very angry, just pure rage, which is appropriate. But like as a player, I became very angry about it. I was able to contextualize it, make sure everyone was cool. But at the same time, it's like afterwards, I was shaking from adrenaline because I'm like, how dare they? And I realized that it is identical to what it's like for women to have to go in the bars to avoid getting roofied. It was a very kind of similar dynamic of like someone gives you something that you don't know to try to get you to do something that they want.
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny because you said that, and my initial reaction was you ate something without knowing what it was. Like, who would do that?
But I mean, I have the privilege, and that character had the privilege of being a white man, where it's like, generally speaking, these kinds of things aren't a problem for me. So, but also
at the same time,
go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say I have a real life ex partner of mine who was a recovering alcoholic, and people in bars would try to give him drinks still. Yeah, like that's still a thing that would happen. He would order a Coke, and somebody would think they'd be being funny. So right. even in that situation, you need to be careful.
No, absolutely. And it came down to because a lot of people ask me, players ask me, why would your character do that? And it's like, it was a very stressful situation. And I was trying to play up the fact that I have seen addicts in my life, when they get stressed out, go back to old habits without even realizing they've done it. And that's what I was tapping into. Whereas in a bar setting, it's okay, when you're a recovering alcoholic, there's a lot of like, okay, well, I know there's alcohol here, so I have to constantly be aware of it because it's so obvious you're there. But you're like, we're with friends and we're hanging out in this glade, and all these people around that I trust that have been very supportive of me. So, it's a kind of that one bad decision, which is a thing that addicts constantly struggle with, is that one bad moment and you're back to zero. And there were a lot of people, other characters were angry on my behalf too, but it really helped me to understand just how hard it is for recovering addicts, because you may be clean for 10 years, but still one bad decision and you're back to zero, and that's huge. So it really helped me to kind of understand and empathize with other addicts and other alcoholics, what they have to kind of go through.
Right. So I propose putting this on an up note.
Oh, yep.
That's because I said that we've only got about 5 more minutes. Is that right? So what if we end this with a character concept for any game, one of our games or somebody else's, that you think would be really fun to play?
So I just had one, actually. I've told this story to Dixie. I don't think I've told it to you, Matthew. At PAX Unplugged, we were going out to dinner with me, Rich, and his wife and our friend Meredith. And there's a schnauzer across the street. And he was going to fight everyone. Like, someone walked by and he's like, woo, like back on his hind legs, and his owner was trying to contain him, and he was just not going to be contained. This schnauzer was having none of it. He was like, I'm going to fight everybody, and I don't care. And I was like, that is so my next Pugmire character. Is just like this schnauzer, gets up on his face, 3 or 4 times bigger than him. He's like, I will take you. It's like, I so want to play that character.
So you want to play me as in Pugmire?
Basically, yeah. I hadn't thought about that, but now I'm doing it.
I'll fight you.
I'll fight you.
Matthew, do you have one, or do you want me to say mine?
I've got one. And this actually hails from the actual play of They Came From Beneath the Sea, which is on Kickstarter on December the 18th. We may even be on December 18th by now, I'm not sure. Either way.
No, it won't quite be there yet.
Thanks for not dating the episode, Matthew. Appreciate that.
Yeah, the actual play... Yeah, the actual play that that's being uploaded, one of the players is playing a character, a mouth. Mouth is one of the archetypes in the game, which is effectively your plucky journalist, your failed actor, that kind of thing. And she made a failed country and western musician based on that screaming guy from Big Enough. That if you've seen that song, the music video for Big Enough, if you haven't, do. It's just a screaming country and western singer called Randy Banjo in They Came From Beneath the Sea. And he just idles into town on the only bus with his guitar, hoping to find his audience, because he's been driven out of every other town for starting a bar fight and breaking his guitars or smashing up jukeboxes and the like. And he's just hoping, here's the place I can make it. And of course then the aliens invade. Now's a chance for him to become a real hero, finally. And we had so much fun with that character. And he was the first mouth, considering the name, he was the first mouth character in They Came From, and of all my playtests, that was a musician.
Huh.
No one else has made a musician out of a mouth. And so yeah, it was just great fun, and it just made me think, oh wow, okay, there's another take on that archetype that players could play with, that they could have a lot of fun with. The failed musician or up-and-coming rock star
really cool.
or the like.
Sounds cool. So mine, which I have mentioned to Eddy before, but I haven't mentioned it on the air, is I want to play a monarchies of Malcat whose only ambition is to be a good dog. I want to play character, like, kind of with that chaotic good kind of character I like to play sometimes, is that I want her to, you know, like, she's terrible at keeping secrets. She's just not good at cat things, and she thinks that the idea of man and the Church of Man is really cool. And so maybe she, like, runs away to Pugmire, and she's just trying to be a good dog and trying to follow all the tenets of the Code of Man. I think that'd be a really, really, really fun character to play.
It would be a lot of fun. And I mean, I'm also the kind of cultural relativism stage, but also just kind of just a fun playing against type character.
Well, yeah, because for both reasons. One, to see how, like, other dogs would react, or how other cats would react to her, because if she's terrible at keeping secrets, that's kind of a problem, you know? But, you know, she just wants to be a good dog. It's cool. She wants to go on adventures and fetch what's been left behind and all that stuff. So that's what she's going to devote her life to.
I just always see
character at some point.
I just always say one with that character, and it's like, you know, okay, we need to keep this quiet, and then your character goes, okay, no problem, turn around going, hey everybody, we need to keep this thing quiet.
Exactly. She's so good that they can't really be that mad at her, but she's also so bad at being a cat.
So we are getting close to time. So if people wanted to come to you and talk to you about your characters, where would they find you, Dixie?
Find me at Dixie Cyanide on Twitter, even though I'm not great at checking my Twitter, and I try. I'm sorry, y'all. Also, in a few weeks, you can find us all at Midwinter Gaming Convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Yeah, Matthew?
Oh, I've just booked my tickets to Milwaukee, so I will be at Midwinter as well. But other than that, if you don't fancy making the trek into the winter snow, you can find me on the Onyx Path forum and YouTube as The Gentleman Gamer. You can find me on Twitter as Clap Click Bang.
And I will also be at Midwinter, although I don't have my flights yet, so we'll figure that piece out. But You can find me just about anywhere at Eddy Fate, EDDYFATE, except Tumblr. I'm probably going to delete my Tumblr account because screw Tumblr. I'm not happy with them right now.
Topical.
Right, topical. But also, you can find my professional stuff anywhere at pugsteady.com. That's where we're going. I'm going to rush off to have a tube stuck in my throat. That'll be fun.
Have fun!
Hey.
Excellent. I think it's something we should all do once or twice.
And with that, of course, many words